All right, so let's make a very nice, simple boat shader. This is going to be actually very, very simple. All I'm going to do, I'm going to delete this image that is on the material, and I'm going to press Control-Shift-T this time with this shader selected. And that way, I can then select all of these textures at once and bring them in, and it'll just add them directly onto the object. Now, one thing you may have noticed, some of these planks are looking very strange. It's just because of this displacement texture, so all I have to do is delete off this, and it should fix everything up real quick. Now, as we can see, we've got these planks that work pretty well, and they look pretty good. And now the shader consists of just a few maps. We have our base color, which is this map right here. We have our roughness map, which basically defines how light scatters across the object. White basically means that it is very rough, and when light hits that object, it's going to spread across it evenly. Gray or black basically means that the object is not rough at all. It's extremely reflective, and light that hits it is going to bounce right off of it and basically just reflect easily. Your normal map is kind of a bluish hued map that defines your bumps and everything. Essentially, it manipulates the way that light interacts with an object in order to give the appearance of a more 3D detailed object. So if we wanted to, we could change out this normal map for a bump map and plug that directly into our normal slot, change our distance and our height, and as you can see, we get these minor bumps that just make this object look a little bit more realistic than just a flat texture would. Now, I'm going to keep it with the normal map from before, and I'm going to do a few extra things to this material just to make it a little bit more interesting. So first, one thing that I remember from the reference image is that the boat was slightly green on the bottom half. Now, what we can do easily for this is we can add in a new material. If we go to the material properties, all we have to do is add a new material. I'm going to choose this wood material that we have, and I'm just going to duplicate it. And I'm just going to call it wood green or wood bottom, whichever one you want. Then with the wood green material selected, I'm going to select the whole bottom half of this boat. So if I select this and I select that and just go all the way around and select all the way around the bottom part of this boat, then I can just click on this button and click assign, and I'm going to add in a mix color node. So just search something. All you have to do is press Shift A, go to the search bar, and you can press Mix Color Node. I'm going to plug it in after this base color. And essentially, what this allows me to do is mix two colors together. So I'm just going to leave it white for now so I know what is chosen as white and what's not. All right, and I want this one colored this same way as well. One issue you'll see is I can't select just this lower half. So what I can do is select this upper half right here on both sides, go to Edge, Mark Seam, and then I can just select the bottom half of it by pressing L and having my delimit as seam. I'm going to make sure to make this whole bottom piece white as well, and then I'll have to make sure to go to the bottom over here, and I'm going to add in a loop cut on the top here. And just to make sure everything lines up here, I'm going to move this downward. Now, if I press GZ, you'll notice the whole texture moves with it, which I don't want. So I'm just going to press GG and then pull this down, and it won't mess with the texture at all. Then I can select this whole loop, press GG again, and move it up until it matches and lines up with the top half of this wood. Actually, we're going to choose the lower half. I can select the top half of the wood, assign it to the original wood color, and there we go. Looks very nice. I also realized I need to do it over here as well. I actually messed that up, and there we go. I'm going to change this value from mix to multiply. So mix, basically, if you change this factor, it allows you to choose between either a mix of both of these materials or one or the other. A factor of 0 chooses only the A value, a factor of 1 chooses only the B value, and then it mixes between those depending on your factor. Now, what you can do also is I'm going to change this to multiply, and what multiply is going to do is it's going to keep my A value and then multiply in the B value's color. If I have a white material, it's not going to multiply in any of that, but if I have a black material, it's going to turn this thing completely black. So what I want to do is just choose a bluish or greenish color. And that way, these two things are multiplied. Now, if I wanted to, I could also do mix and just mix in a slight amount, or I could choose mix, choose my color, and then I can move all these backwards by selecting everything and moving them over. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in two new nodes. So the noise texture, which is a node that basically just creates a random pattern of noise across your object. And then we're going to add in a color ramp, which allows you to basically pull this black and white value closer together in order to create harsher transitions between the two. So if I plug this color into the factor of my mix, then these white and black values are 0 and 1, and I can basically make a kind of noisy mix between the two, essentially making like a chipping paint look. So I'm going to do that. One thing you'll notice is that it stretches along the side. That's because this noise texture is based on the UVs of my object. What I want to do instead is add in mapping coordinates. The way you can do that is just select anything and press Control T, and if it is a texture, it will add the mapping coordinates to it. Then we can choose object mode, which takes the size of the object into account, and it'll make everything just look even. So now I can play around with these values, the scale, which changes how big these noise clumps are, the detail, which basically tells you how much these break apart on the edges, and the roughness, which basically decides between more detail or less detail. So I'm going to keep this value low, like 6, and turn the roughness up pretty high, and then I'm going to break these two apart like this, so we mix slightly in this greenish color. I'm also going to change the scale of this to be 0.4 or so. That way it stretches across the object a little bit more, and it just looks a little bit more natural to me if I do this like 0.2 and keep this Z value at 1. And there we go. We can mix in this value. And you'll notice we still get the bumps from the normal map, which helps sell the idea that this is just kind of a painted wood that's chipping. Now, one thing that I do want to change a little bit is paint is probably a little bit more reflective. So what I can do is I can add a color ramp onto my roughness, and I can bring this black value down, and what's going to happen is it's going to make these gray values darker and keep these white values the same, and thus make this a little bit more reflective looking. As you can see, if I pull this value back, it disperses the light a little bit more evenly. But if I bring this up more, and I bring this up more as well, then there's a much sharper contrast between the two, and I can get more of a painted reflective look. Now, the last thing about this boat is this wood material. I just don't really like it. It's too lightly colored, so I want to make it a little bit browner. All I have to do for that is add in a mix color node, and I can set the color to multiply like we did before, turn the factor all the way up, and I can just give it a slightly orangish or brown color, some sort of mahogany, and yeah, mix that color in. Another option that we can do is we can plug this back into the base color, and we can use an RGB curve, which is another type of node. Essentially, you can control the contrast, the red, green, and the blue channels. What I'm going to do is bring the contrast down so it's darker, and then I can just up the red channel, which gives more of a brownish color. And yeah, basically we can get the exact same result. It all depends on which way you prefer working, but also because it's a curve, we can add different values onto here and basically change the way that this texture looks in general by changing different values and affecting them however we really want to. So now that I have that, there's one last thing I do want to share. Generally, whenever you have a boat and you make some water, a lot of beginners have a problem where they don't really know how to make sure that the boat's not clipping. This is a super easy, simple fix. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick right now. Sorry, I just wanted to make a water material real quick. So first, what I'm going to do to make sure that this works is I'm going to select the whole outside of the boat by pressing L, and I'm going to set my delimit to normal. The reason this works to only select the outside is because we separated it at the very beginning. So now that we have that, all I'm going to do is select this loop that's going all the way around the outside by holding Alt and clicking on it. And if I press F, I will fill in that face. And there we go. Now, I'm going to select this whole thing again. I can also remove the seams off of this, or I can just select it with normal. To remove a seam, by the way, you just go to Edge and choose Clear Seam. Once we have that, I'm going to press P, Separate by Selection. Then, once I have this selected as its own object, I'm going to go to the Object Properties, which is this orange box. I'm going to go to Viewport Display, and I'm going to display it as bounds. That way, I'm going to be able to see through it. I'm also going to make sure that instead of being able to see it like this, I am going to go to Visibility and turn on Camera. And under Ray Visibility, I'm going to uncheck Camera. That way I can see just this box. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use a modifier, much like the bevel one we used before. We're going to use a Boolean modifier. We're going to select this water that we have, and I'm going to add a new modifier under the Generate. We're going to go to Boolean, and essentially what a Boolean does is it's an operation that basically allows you to make cuts or combinations and combine different objects together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose Fast, we're going to choose Difference, and then with this eyedropper tool under Object, I'm going to select this cube that we've got. And as you can see, nothing happens right now. But if I bring this thing downward onto the water, you'll see we have this hole in the water. So essentially all we want to do is press GZ and move it downward until we've gotten rid of all the water inside of the boat. And you'll notice, though, if we move the boat, that this does not move with it. So what we need to do is we can select this object, and then we can select our boat, and we can press Control P, which brings up this parent menu, and we can parent it to the object, choose Keep Transform to keep everything the same. And wherever we move the boat now, our Boolean follows and removes the water inside of the boat. Now, I forgot to mention this, but one more way that you could improve the texture of your boat is by using ambient occlusion. Essentially, ambient occlusion is a way to define basically close proximity between corners and edges, and it'll basically add shadows into these tight little areas. So it's a little bit easier to show than it is to explain. So I'll just show you. The way you set it up is very simple. So I'll just show you. If we add an ambient occlusion texture, I can plug the color into my base color real quick, and you'll see that wherever these objects are close to each other, we get a lot of darkening happening. So if we want to control this a little more, I can add in a color ramp, and I can use this, bring the black value down and make these shadows a little bit harsher. Then I can add in another mix color node, set it to multiply, which will in turn allow me to add dark areas over top of my texture where these black areas are, and where the white areas are, it won't change. And then I can plug this into the A value, plug this into the B value, and then plug this out to the base color. And if I turn up the factor, it'll darken up these edges a little bit, and basically it just adds a little bit of extra realism to everything. And it looks nice to me. Now you might want to do the exact same thing down here on this green boat. I know there's not a lot of areas where there are tight corners, but one of the nice things about ambient occlusion is it works between objects. So ideally, we should be able to see some ambient occlusion from the water, which will help us kind of sell the idea that this boat is in the water. If I turn this down just a little bit, so it's only darkening a little, and bring this value up, then I can actually use this same mix color node. If I press Shift D, it'll duplicate it. I can move it down here where my roughness is, and then I can multiply the ambient occlusion in with that roughness, turn it all the way up, and then you'll see that the bottom of this boat is now extremely, extremely reflective. So that's a really nice, easy trick to use that can help make the bottom of a boat look wet, while the top of the boat does not look wet. Now, one thing you may notice that's causing an issue is we have this weird shadow when we're in cycles. The reason for that is because this ambient occlusion is also being affected by our Boolean. So if I hide that, you'll see that this goes away. What we want to do in order to make that not happen is if we go back into this object properties and go to visibility, we can turn off shadow, and that will get rid of the ambient occlusion in there. And yeah, it should make everything just look a lot more natural. So there we go, the simplest, quickest way to make a boat in Blender. Best thing about this wood texture is that we can change it to any color that we'd like and essentially just make a bunch of random boats. So if you like the tutorial, make sure to follow and share for more. Let me know what you would like to model next. I may keep this up going with some easy, simple beginner tutorials. If you're interested in making this water shader and or a much better one, I have a video on my YouTube channel about realistic water in Blender. So go check that out if you're interested, and I will see you all next time.